What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Reformed Reader, a channel where we review different forms of media through the lens of a Christian who is under the authority of the scriptures. My name is Josh, and today we're going to be looking at Swan Song by Robert McCammon. So let's start with, what is this book about? Facing down an unprecedented malevolent enemy, the U.S. government responds with a nuclear attack. Soon, America as it was is gone forever, and now every citizen, from the President of the United States to the homeless on the streets of New York City, will fight to stay alive. In a wasteland born of rage and fear, populated by monstrous creatures and marauding armies, Earth's last survivors are drawn into the final battle between good and evil, which will decide the fate of humanity. Sister, who discovers a strange and transformative glass artifact in the destroyed Manhattan streets. Joshua Hutchins, the pro wrestler who takes refuge from the nuclear fallout at a Nebraska gas station. And Swan, a young girl possessing special powers who travels alongside Josh to a Midwest town where healing and recovery can begin with her extraordinary gifts. But the ancient force behind the world's devastation is scouring the walking wounded for recruits to build its relentless army, beginning with Swan herself. Swan Song is classic Robert McCammon, a prescient and shocking vision of a post-apocalyptic landscape, a grand epic of terror and ultimately renewal. So guys, the way I normally structure these reviews is I go over the good, the bad, and the ugly. So let's talk about the good. First and foremost, the characters in this story are phenomenal. They are extremely memorable. They are diverse. And what I mean by that is that they're not in here for diversity's sake, but they are distinct. These characters have stuck with me since I read this, I think 2 years ago now. The characters in this book are just fantastic. They are so different from characters that I've read in other works that, I mean, they just stick with you. And not only that, but you can empathize with each one of them, which is wild. Maybe not each one of them. There may be one that I hope you don't empathize with, but all of them you can relate to in some way, especially considering the circumstances. So like the synopsis said, this is a post-apocalyptic world where it's kind of each man for himself, and it dives into a version of what humanity could become. So like I said, the characters are wonderful. The world is pretty bleak. Now, it's very well written, but it is not a world of generosity and levity. So know that going into it. Prose is good. It's accessible. It's definitely not the easiest book that I've ever read, but it's also not difficult. It's a pretty easy read, which is good because, I mean, this is a very thick book. I think, let's see, it tops out at like 900 pages. You know, it's a thick book. It's an investment. But this book is also broken up into 2 parts. Now, this is one of those points of contention for a lot of people. I actually liked it that way. Part 1 kind of goes over who our characters are, and then the nuclear event. And then there's sort of a stopping point midway. And that midway point is sort of a Rubicon for each of our characters. And then when you dive into part 2, you see, okay, they've decided to cross this Rubicon and the consequences that they face after making that decision of the direction they decide to go with their lives.
Sometimes I'll start a sentence and I don't even know where it's going. I just hope I find it along the way.
There's a lot of good in here. There's a lot of good. There's a lot of what I liked. I can't go into it too much just because there's a lot of spoilers, and I'm trying to avoid spoilers at all costs for people that haven't read this yet. But like I said, this is very much a character book. The plot is excellent, but I was more invested in the characters than I was the story. That may be different for you. The characters, the plot, the prose, all phenomenal. So that leads us to the bad. What were some things or stylistic choices that I didn't like or that didn't work for me? Now, again, these are things that just didn't work for me, preferentially as a reader. There were a few things. I thought it was kind of bloated, if I'm being frank.
Hey, Frank.
There's a lot of time that we have to invest into this book, and I don't think all of it was worth it. I don't think all of it paid off, not as much as I would have wanted, but because there's so much to each character and there's so much nuance to each character, that does tend to bring us to having to learn some more of the inconsequential things about them, which I think is what sort of contributed to some of the bloat. I mean, really, that's probably my biggest gripe is going to be It just seemed a little bloated, at least for me. I still thought it was good, don't get me wrong, but it was definitely longer than it had to be. And I picked this up right after Boy's Life. And so coming right after Boy's Life was, the bar was set very high. So I was a little let down by the end of it. So again, as a preferential thing, the ending, which I'm not going to go into, the ending was a little more open-ended than I would have liked. It also wasn't exactly, for those of you that have read it, it wasn't exactly what I was hoping for as far as the good versus evil story, but it was still good. But to me, it didn't blow me away like Boy's Life did. So that's the preferential things. But again, not to detract from it overall. So that leads us to the ugly. And what I mean by that is, what could be some sin that is steeped into this work that might hold another Christian back from picking it up? And there's quite a few things in here. Quite a few. This is a rated R book. That's the only way I can explain it. If this book were turned into a movie, it would have to be rated R, even if they decided to cut some things. Know that going into it. If you are uncomfortable with watching rated R movies, you're not going to want to read this book. I'm just trying to be completely transparent with you. So what might be inside this that would give it that type of a rating? Almost everything that you could think of that would give a movie an R rating is in here. Number one, the language. The language is harsh at times, very harsh, especially in the latter part of the book. It tends to get excessive. And if I wasn't so invested in the story and I didn't already trust Robert McCammon because of Boy's Life, I very well may have put it down. The language is very heavy. Not only that, there are some explicit scenes in here. There is some sexual assault that takes place in here that's not extremely descriptive, but it's descriptive enough that makes you very uncomfortable reading it. There's adult themes in here. There's a personification of evil that I think was maybe just too descriptive at times for my tastes. Again, I think I've come to realize that I'm pretty much like a PG-13 type reader. I think that tends to be my sort of the ceiling that I'm comfortable with reading. Most of the time, rated R books, it would have to be something like, violence or gore. But I personally do not prefer the excessive language, the excessive explicit content, things like that. That's just not my preference. And so this definitely leans into that. So if you're debating on whether or not to pick this book up, I would say if you are uncomfortable with being made uncomfortable in your entertainment, then this is not going to be a book for you, because you are going to be made uncomfortable in pretty much every kind of way. There are characters that say some very blasphemous things in here too. No, and again, none of this is to be glorified, right? These characters aren't saying these things as if it's good. This is a world that breaks down into depravity. And so the best way that I can describe it is, this is a post-apocalyptic world, and the bad guys are kind of taking over and sort of pull on that thread. And that's kind of what you get here with the setting. So just know that going into it. Now, if you know that going into it and convictionally, or those things don't affect you in a very severe way, this very well may be the book for you, because a lot of people love this. And some people even put this above Boy's Life. They're wrong, but a lot of people put this up even above Boy's Life, or at least in the same category. It is such a completely different story. It almost seems like, to me, it was written by two different authors. So as far as the sin that is steeped in here, it can get pretty heavy at times. Now, there is the constant theme of hope underneath this. The character of Swan is our story of hope within this book. And it is a story of good conquering evil. So I don't want it to seem like it's just, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. No, it is a story of hope in a hopeless setting. However, it is a very heavy book, physically and metaphorically. It is a heavy, heavy read. And so there were several times where I would have to put the book down because of what I read, just so I could kind of stew on it a little bit and or maybe even go to something else that's a little more lighthearted, because it does get heavy at times. So I would not recommend this to a newer reader, a less seasoned reader, or somebody that hasn't dabbled into some of the more gritty, grim, R-rated type of works. I would not recommend this to those people. So that does lead me into the next question, which is, should Christians read it, or would I recommend this to a Christian? And it really depends. And what I mean by that is I say it depends a lot. And a lot of times I say, well, it depends on your convictions and the severity of those convictions. And while that is true here, this is a much more nuanced book, because keep in mind that we're looking at these books through an already nuanced set of lenses as Christians. And then on top of that, there's so much nuance that falls underneath that category that it is hard for me to say yes or no. But with this, I would say for most Christians, I probably would not recommend this book. However, there are some that I think would love this. For instance, my friend Dustin over at Preacher Reads, I bet he probably loves this book. I bet this is a book for him. And he shouldn't have any qualms over enjoying this book, because as Christians, we have liberty, right? And so we shouldn't abuse that liberty, but we do have liberty to enjoy certain things. And there are some things that maybe we shouldn't enjoy, but I don't think this crosses that threshold. I don't think this meets the criteria of it just being sin to read this by any means, like I would some other books or some other movies that we watch. But I would say just approach this with caution, because I liked it. I thought it was good. Now, will I pick it up again? I don't know. Probably not for a long time, because it is so thick, but I liked it enough to keep it. So who shouldn't read this book? I would say any Christian that has convictions over severe language, explicit content, some descriptors of sexual assault, things like that in your works, definitely don't pick this up. Now, again, this book does not glorify these things. It does demonize these things. It does show these things for what they are, which is depraved and sinful and evil and wicked, unrighteous. And then we see the story of righteousness that is overcoming that unrighteousness in this book. So I wouldn't recommend this to people that tend to want to stay PG-13. Now, who would I recommend this to? Any Christian that loves to read, that likes Stephen King, I bet you'll like this. Any Christian that likes horror movies, I bet you'll like this. Any Christian that likes to get in those gritty, grim, bleak worlds and then see that glimmer of hope and the bleak, gritty, grim, dark world that surrounds it makes that light so much brighter, you're probably going to love this book. But for me, it was pretty good. It was good enough that I kept it. But again, would I recommend it to Christians? Man, it really depends. It would have to be somebody a little more nuanced for me to say you should read this, because there would be some people that I would not recommend this to, and that if they picked it up, I would feel embarrassed that I was promoting this book towards them. So it's really going to depend on you, the reader. I would say for most people, they're not going to want to pick this up. They're not going to enjoy it. They're probably going to have to put the book down at some point. But for those that like those types of worlds, that like Stephen King and those horror movies, you're probably going to really like this. So should a Christian read it? It really depends. I will lean more towards no, but it depends on you, the reader. Would I recommend it to a Christian? I would, but it really depends on who that person is. I would have to really do some deep diving and ask a lot of questions before I could recommend this book. Like I would probably ask, what kind of movies do you like to watch? And then I would even say, do you like movies like this? Do you like stories like that? And then that would really help me gauge whether or not I could say, this is probably going to be for you, or for me to say, yeah, that's probably not for you. Now, keep in mind that I always tend to err on the side of caution with these things. I would rather have not picked something up than pick something up and then have to put it down later. That's just my preference. Some people are on the other end of the spectrum, and they, they're like, it was fine for me to pick that up, even though I probably won't read it again. And that's entirely up to you. But as far as if you're asking me, which if you're watching this video, I assume that's what you're doing. For me, I would say approach with caution. So if you are unsure, maybe watch some more reviews other than just mine. See what they have to say about the book before you dive into it, because I don't want you to get 600 pages and then realize that you you have to put it down for convictional reasons. But you may not have to put it down. There were times reading this that I thought I was going to have to. Got right up to the line, and McCammon was able to reel it back in. And so, again, for the last time, should a Christian read this? It depends. And would I recommend this to a Christian? It depends. Just depends on the individual. I am not going to tell you to pick this book up. I would tell you to err on the side of caution. I would tell you to ask a mentor of yours, ask your pastor, ask some of the men or women that you have confidence in, the brothers and sisters that you have confidence in, whether or not you should be entertained by these things. And listen to that counsel. We're supposed to be edifying one another. And this is one of the ways we do that, is by trying to dwell on the things that are good. And so, are there things that are good in this book? Absolutely. They are surrounded by bad, which makes the good so much better. So, don't really know that I can recommend this one to you. I did want to give my thoughts on it. I liked it. I didn't love it. I wouldn't even say I really liked it. I really liked some of the characters. Overall, I thought it was pretty good. I don't know that I'll revisit it, but let me know what you thought of it. Let me know down in the comments below if you like this book or not, or maybe give me some more recommendations with Robert McCammon, because so far the only ones I've read was Boy's Life, Swan Song, and I picked up Speaks the Night Bird, which I had to put down. So let me know if there's some other books within his catalog that I should pick up, because again, I'm happy to add them to my overfilled Amazon cart. But yeah, let me know down in the comments if you liked it, if you didn't like it, why or why not. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It does help the channel out, gets this video out in front of other eyes. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I super appreciate it. Again, thank you guys so much for sticking around, for listening to what I have to say. I really do appreciate you. Thank you again, and I will see you on the next one.